men's group this morning. I actually had an appointment at 6 o'clock this morning, but I was looking forward to this appointment that I get right now. Then we had men's group. We got to sit down, and I have a men's group here in Carlsbad. And if you're ever in Carlsbad and you're listening, you want to come, it's unbelievable what happens. But this is the first time that I've ever looked past my men's group. Hopefully my guys in my men's group are not watching right now. But I was looking past it because I got a chance to be able to meet a young man that really changed things for me because of how he listened. And we sat and we talked, and when we connected, I had no idea the magnitude of who this man is, but he treated me like I was the star. He treated me like I was the one that had the light shining on me, when he is the only truck certified, board certified personal injury attorney in all of Iowa. In all of Iowa, he's the top. He's the top of the food chain. But as opposed to talking about all the things that he did and how he could beat his chest and how he could tell me about all of the things that he has accomplished, he sat there and he asked me questions, and we had a conversation. I got to know my friend named Tim before I ever knew that I was speaking to the Tim Semelroth. And it was incredible over the time that we got to spend at NiftyCon, where he just lifted people up. His smile was infectious, but he is an absolute beast at every single thing that he does. And we talked, and he said that he took something from me. I was talking about being in Chicago, and in Chicago or Vegas, everybody's got a guy. And it's amazing for me now because in Iowa, if I need anything when it comes to law, if I need anything as far as personal injury, especially in the truck side of it, I've got a guy. And anyone out there that's in Iowa, you have a guy, and you're going to get to meet the one and only Tim Semelroth. So why don't we get this party started?
Nothing more on my mind. I got two shines, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised. Over and over and over again. Make no mistake, we continue to win. Defeat never known, cause I will not lose. They wanna mimic my moves, but can't walk in my shoes.
As we say, the champ is here, the champ is here, the champ is here. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Hey, thank you. And thank you for making me feel so welcome by wearing Iowa Hawkeye colors today.
I had to represent, we were just talking about Caitlin Clark, right before we started recording, and you got a chance to be able to see her play.
Yes. And it is even more electric in person than it is on TV. And, she's just somebody that we're very proud of. She stays late to sign autographs for every girl. She gives thoughtful answers to all of her, any interview question that gets asked. And I tell you, she is appointment viewing in the state of Iowa. If there is a fever game on, I cannot get my wife out of the house. We got to watch the game.
I am the king of bad comparisons, but here's the thing that made me the connection point between the two of you is when I look at a Caitlin Clark, she's not trying to be anything that she's not. She's okay with doing exactly what she, like in her wheelhouse, almost like working your land. And the reason why I say that is because the connection point with you is I see that with you. And I saw that throughout NiftyCon when we were hanging out. You weren't trying to be anything that you weren't. You have your lane, and you have dominated your lane. How can a person first find their lane, and then number two, dominate their lane?
Well, first of all, being compared to Caitlin Clark is the nicest thing you can say to an Iowan. So thank you very much. But, I think a lot of it is just figuring out what makes you tick. And being open to the opportunities that are out there. And, I never intended, it was not the long-term plan to be a board certified truck accident lawyer, but it makes sense given who I am, what's important to me. And so it's just been fantastic.
How did that happen? Because that's a very specific. I was just talking with the CEO of a company called CalSense. His name is AJ, and I was talking with him, and we were saying sometimes people niche down too early, and they don't create the muscles around the niche to be strong enough, and so they don't see any opportunity except that one little thing. But you seem to not only have mastered the niche, but also, I mean, it's not the only thing that you do. How can a person foster that?
Well, I mean, all I can tell you is my story. So I became a personal injury lawyer uh, for a couple of reasons, but the biggest reason is, as a lawyer, you get to decide who you want to work for, who you want to represent, and it's completely honorable to say, hey, I want to work for the government or to work for companies, but when I got out of law school, I wanted to work for people like my parents. My dad worked in a factory. My mom was a school teacher, and they did not know a lawyer. They did not interact with lawyers in their everyday life. And if something terrible would have happened, they would not have known who to call. And when I started, I tried. I clerked in a number of different places and did everything from looking at franchise agreements for restaurants to working in a prosecutor's office. And ultimately, I decided I was most comfortable when I was sitting down in front of regular folks like my parents and explaining their legal situation and telling them what I could do to try to help them.
What do you wish that people knew about, or to dispel myths about personal injury? Because there's stigmas with any industry. There's always the stigmas because there are the percentage of the profession that maybe don't do as savory of things or are known for those things. What are some of the myths that you wish that people, if they dug deep enough, that they would understand about the importance of a personal injury attorney?
Well, I just say, have you ever handled a insurance claim by yourself in your life? Did you think that you were treated fairly? Did you think that you were listened to? And if you weren't, and now you have something even more important happening because either you or somebody you loved has had something horrible happen to them that's probably life changing, don't you want to have an expert, somebody who has been through this process, who can guide you through step by step and make sure you're getting what's fair?
So there, with all my attorney friends, right? I have got one who I want you to meet. His name is Michael Adams, and Michael is a apex. Like, you guys are apex predators. Like, not a predator in a bad sense, but I'm just saying, you guys have this switch. I see it in my brother. I know it's there with you. I haven't seen it yet with Tim. How do you know when to turn the switch on and off, and especially when it flows into personal life too? Because I wouldn't want to be on the other side of the case with you, Tim, although I love being your friend and being on your side. How do you find the switch, first of all, and then how do you manage it?
Well, first of all, there doesn't need to be as much conflict as you would think, because I don't see myself as a professional arguer. I see myself as a professional storyteller. And so my job is to get to know my clients, get to know their story so I can tell it to the insurance company. And if the insurance company isn't going to treat us fairly, then I'm going to tell it to the jury. But I don't approach a trial like a fight. I approach it like, hey, I'm going to tell a story here. I'm going to give you the truth of what happened. And hopefully you, the jury, are going to be the heroes in this story because you have the power to make sure that my clients get treated fairly.
What's the biggest misstep that most people make when they either, like, let's go into the truck side of it. Say they get into some sort of accident, they have something happen. What are some of the biggest mistakes that the client can make that will impede, the best possible outcome for us?
Same mistake that applies to the public also applies to lawyers. and that is treating a truck case like it's just a big car case. And that is a huge mistake. So from the public side, going to a lawyer because you know that they do a good job with car accident cases when you were involved in a truck wreck, that's a mistake. For the lawyers, it is just assuming that, hey, I've handled car accident cases, so therefore I can handle a truck accident case. They are very different. Trucks are very different types of vehicles. They handle differently. They are regulated differently. The pressures that are on truck drivers are very different than the car driver. And so the worst thing that can happen when you're in front of the jury is if you haven't educated them about the difference of driving a semi or an 18-wheeler, because if not, they're going to default to what they would have done as the driver of a car. And the reality is that if you drove an 18-wheeler like you drove your Toyota Camry, it would be an incredibly dangerous situation, not just for you, but for everybody you share the roadway with.
Let's go to the jury part. This part fascinates me. As a kid, I remember seeing 12 Angry Men, and you know, I'm like the original one, and the deliberation and the when the jury deliberates afterwards. But what always got me was the opening and closing arguments. Are you allowed to take us behind the curtain to understand the cadence? Is there a my dad was a boxer. Is there a jab? Is there a cross? Is there a hook, a setup for a knockout blow? Is there a way that you can kind of construct the story to be able to do that? Is that something that's a cadence for you?
Absolutely. So there, a couple of things about. I'll start with opening statements. So the thing about an opening statement is jurors judge what they understand. And so if you tell the story of your client and the horrible thing that happened to them, they're going to judge your client, and they're going to pick apart the choices or the decisions they make. So as a plaintiff's lawyer, the key is you've got to tell a story in opening statement that is a story of what the defendants did, because it's that story that is going to move the jury to act. And so the other thing, you asked about tactics. Another important tactic in opening statement is you have to win the opening statement if you're the plaintiff. You have to make sure that you're telling a complete story, including what you believe the other side is going to bring up. Because if I just tell a story that is only positive to my client, and then the defense lawyer gets up and says, hey, there's another side to this thing, they're going to look at me and say, well, I can't trust him anymore because he only told me half the story. So the key is to be able to tell the full story in opening statement, the story of what the defendant did wrong and how that impacted your client's life. And so I love opening statement because it is what I spend as much time on as any aspect of trial, because if you can nail that, then you are in the driver's seat for the rest of the case.
Talk to us about the closing statement, because this part for me, like probably one of my favorites, which obviously this is, it's 100% true because all movies are, was in A Time to Kill. And A Time to Kill, John Grisham, obviously I enjoyed his books. They were easy to read. That's why I liked them. But I remember that scene, and it was so, obviously it's Hollywood. But take us to the closing arguments. Are they set up anything like what we see? Because most of the time, if you're not an attorney, the only time that you get in touch with attorneys is when you need one, which then you're kind of almost like you're not even thinking of the things that they're doing. You're just like, I hope I get it through this thing. Or in movies. Is the closing argument anywhere close to that? And how would it be set up?
So the closing argument is different in real life, because think about your audience. Your audience is the jury. They've already sat through the trial. They've sat through the opening statements. They've heard all the witnesses testify. this is not a time when you're going to introduce a new fact or a new situation. You have to have forecast all that. They have to have seen it. So the difference is in goal. Remember, in opening statement, it's to tell the story of the case. In closing argument, your job is to give the jurors what they need to go deliberate the case. And so in some ways, you're the cheerleader, right? You're motivating them. You're like, hey, here's what you have. Here's the evidence. Here's the law. And you need to motivate them to go into the jury room and to do the right thing. And so, but you're doing it based upon the understanding that they've already seen, whether it's days or weeks of evidence. You don't have to just repeat it. So the mistake that people make is sometimes you'll hear closing argument referred to as the summation. And if you're just getting up and summarizing what they already heard, their eyes are going to glaze over because they've already heard it. Your job is to motivate them to make the decisions that they need to make and give them the information. So the metaphor I like to use is your job is to light the torch and then hand the torch to them and let them go march with it.
So what's the difference? Like, say I'm the client, because the client, a lot of times, well, most of the times we're uneducated about the process, although we want to be as involved in the process as possible because we heard or we saw it on TikTok or we saw it on Google or we saw it wherever. And so when do you know when to settle as opposed to go to trial? And how can we as the client, how can we help you in this scenario to be the perfect client as you move through?
So in terms of being the perfect client, what you need to do is just be open and honest with your lawyer about not just about the facts of the case, but what's important to you and what you're hoping to accomplish. From the lawyer's standpoint, in terms of when to settle or when to go to trial, that is ultimately a choice for the client to make. Going through trial is hard. Right? Going through trial is hard. What I want to do is I'm going to lay out all the options. I'm going to say, okay, this is what you can settle for. This is what this means, or we can go to trial and this happens. What I tell clients is the best verdicts I've ever gotten have been when the clients say, turn down that settlement offer. We're going to go to trial. And the worst verdicts I've ever gotten have been when the client says, we're turning down the settlement offer. But the choice is in their hands. This is their case. My job is to help them make an educated decision and, give them the pluses and minuses. And ultimately it comes down to the kind of risk that they are willing to deal with. And, sometimes you have clients who are very risk adverse. And if they get a settlement offer that's in the range, they're going to want to settle the case. Other times you got clients that say, hey, I'm not going to be able to look at myself in the mirror if I take this settlement offer. And I say that's fine because I'm going to move on to the next case when this one's done. But this is the case that you have to live with for the rest of your life. And so what I say is, when I see you in the grocery store, when I see you, walking down the street, I want you to be able to look at me and say, hey, Tim did right by me. And that's not going to happen if I talk them into a settlement or talk them into going to trial if that's not where their heart is.
So let's talk about the building of a law firm, because there's the one side of, single practitioner, or sometimes you'll have, the attorney, they maybe have one attorney with them and then they have a support staff within. You have gone out to dominate Iowa. Like this is, when I say that, like you dominate a whole state. Like if you're in Iowa, there's a guy, and that guy is Tim Semelroth. Although you can't touch every single person that your firms touch. How does a person go about building that type and still keeping the type of personal touch that you have? And I want to compliment you because I've got a chance to be able to talk with some of your team, and your team has the same spirit as you. How do you do that?
Well, I can only say how I did it. And it starts with what brought me to law school in the first place. As I told you, my dad worked in a factory. My mom was a teacher, and so my first exposure to the legal profession was a extracurricular activity called mock trial. And it's a competition that's now in all 50 states, typically in high schools. Some states like Iowa start it in middle school. And you get coached by a lawyer and you learn how to put on a trial and you compete. And so that was the first time that I thought to myself, well, hey, maybe I want to be a lawyer. I like this activity. I like speaking for people. I like my coach. And so I kept doing that in high school. I did it in college. That took me to law school. But when I was in law school, I didn't know if I was going to stay in Iowa. And I had a little bit of time, and I said, I should go back to the middle school that the teacher was still there. And I said, why don't I help out with the mock trial team, for a year? Well, that was 28 years ago. I've been coaching middle school and high school mock trial ever since. And as a result, 25% of the lawyers in my firm are my former mock trial students.
Gosh.
And I can look at the majority of the lawyers in my firm, and my connection to them in some way, shape, or form was based around this activity, mock trial.
So when you're looking at it, I'm reading this too, Tim, as I read it. As former president of the Iowa chapter of American Board of Trial Advocates, former president of Iowa Association of Justice, served as a member in several sections of the American Association for Justice, currently serves as faculty for the Trial Lawyers College, and is on the Board of Regents for the Academy of Truck Accident Attorneys. Now, that's a lot. That is a ton, right? Let's talk about, though, you were looking at the long game. And I love this because I noticed this about you at NiftyCon, which was awesome, by the way. But I noticed this about you is you weren't ever just looking for that specific moment. It was almost like you were throwing the ball to where it was going as opposed to where the receiver was going as opposed to where they were at the time. Where did you learn that? And how important is it to be involved with so many different aspects of your business?
So I learned it from my mentors, the two guys that started the firm. I was their first hire after they started the firm over 30 years ago. And they taught me that in our profession, we want to be givers, not just takers. And so what that means is that there are positions that you have to serve in order to make sure that the system works. And we are going to support you so that you can take a role. But the thing is, and they made this very clear to me, when you're there, do your best. This isn't about building a resume. This isn't about cocktail hours. This is about making sure that you leave whatever organization it is, whatever group it is, a little bit better than the way that it was when you started. And so, each of those organizations, and it sounds like a lot when you read them off. That's over the course of 25 years. But they all come from the same place, and that is, we are all responsible for the health of our justice system, and we each have to take a turn on that wall, making sure that it's there for the next person who needs it. And in the legal profession, oftentimes that means being in groups like that, leading those groups. Doing things like making sure that the justice system is sufficiently funded, or making sure that people's rights aren't taken away at the legislature.
So growing leaders, Tim, is probably one of the most rewarding things, but also you run the highest risk. And the reason why I say it is because for a person who builds people who support them in their business, those people generally don't jump and go and start their own business or start their own stuff. When you build leaders, leaders end up wanting to continue to move on. But you have seemed to figure out this secret sauce. How many attorneys do you have right now?
We have 16.
Okay, 6, that's a lot. So how do you foster leaders and then keep them in your organization the way that you have?
Well, first you invest in them. You invest in their education. You make sure they're getting cutting edge training. You make sure that they're getting the best technology possible to do their jobs. And hopefully what you're doing is creating an environment that they never want to leave. Where are they going to have it this good, where they get their pick of clients, where they get to use the latest and greatest technology, where they get supported in going to the best training. And so that's the idea. It's like I want trial lawyers, I want great lawyers to be in our firm, but I want them to think this is great. All I have to do is come and I get to be the best lawyer I can be at this firm because they're helping me get there. And why would I ever leave?
What are some of the benefits, like for you, the things that, and I'm not talking about the compensation as far as financially, but what are some of the things that you are very passionate about to make sure and provide for your people that is outside the payroll side that would keep a person inside your firm?
Sure. Well, we want lifelong learners. Okay. And so there is a lot of good continuing legal education. And some of it comes to Iowa, and sometimes you have to travel outside the state. And so we want to make sure that if somebody comes to us and say, hey, here's this seminar that is going to help me in this case, we'll say, hey, we'll pay for it. Go there, and learn a lot and come back and teach us all. Or it's a group that they want to be a part of. I mean, that's a thing. Iowa only has 3 million people. In some ways, it can seem small, but we want to encourage them to have a national network of people that they can get to know and rely on. And that takes money, right? It takes money to travel. It takes money to pay the dues. It takes money to it takes time off to do those things. And hopefully they feel like they are supportive, because that's what we want. We don't just want them to be the best lawyer that they can be in Iowa. We want them to be the best lawyer that they can be anywhere, and hopefully they're going to choose to stay with us.
So this blew me away when we spent time together too, because you spend a lot of time. You just came off a speaking circuit. You got to do Ben Glass's convention there. I believe it was in Arizona. Am I correct? Was it Arizona?
Yeah. Yep.
But you talked about this national presence, right? And so this was genius. You talked about this national presence. You go out and you speak at all these different conventions all over the country. But Tim dominates Iowa. Help me to understand why a nationwide presence of everybody knowing who Tim is, and that they got a guy in Tim, when Tim only does business in Iowa.
Well, the thing is that we've got highways that run through Iowa. We've got it's not going to be a situation where everybody, when I speak at these national conferences, is going to have a case in Iowa. But what I want to be is top of mind, so that when they need anything in Iowa, maybe it's not a lawyer that does what I do. Maybe it's a different kind of lawyer, or maybe it's a partner in their firm who has to file something in Iowa, or it's a relative whose kid is going to school at one of the colleges in Iowa. It's like, I want them to reach out to me, because what I can say to them is, I know Iowa. I was born here. I was raised here. I am deeply connected. If they have a question about a judge, I'm on the state commission that helps select judges. I can give them a little bit of background about that. if I don't know the person that if I don't have the expertise in my firm to help them, I know someone who does. And so that's, I'm not looking to take over the world. I'm not looking to, fly around and try cases everywhere. I'm very comfortable being your guy in Iowa, and the highest value, the highest use that I can provide to all these great trial lawyers that we've recruited to our firm is to feed them, good cases, and that means seeing great people like you at the conferences we speak at.
So here, I want to go into the marketing side. You're a genius at marketing. We sat and we got a chance to talk. We didn't even play pool that night. I don't even know if you could play pool. I'm sure you can. You probably would have whooped me. That's why you didn't, Tim. That's why we didn't play. But we sat there in the pool room, and we were chatting, and we were chatting a lot about marketing. And you're a marketing genius, and to see. When we had salons years ago, before we sold them, and we did some untraditional marketing, meaning that my brother used to work in did some agent work in the UFC, and he would call me when a guy had a spot before Reebok took over, when he had a spot on his shorts. It was like the night before. They hadn't sold the sponsorship. He's like, Kel, you want to be on so-and-so shorts? Yeah, how much is it? He would be like, how much you got? And so I would get it at the last moment. And there was a lot of times where I got on Fox for 15 minutes on a UFC fighter's shorts, and people were like, how can you connect a salon with, with a fighter? And I would always have it on the lead leg of the guy if he had strong legs, like if he was kicking a person to death, or if I knew he was a jiu-jitsu practitioner and he generally was on top, I would have it across his butt. And people would ask me all the time, like, why? What was the connection point? And what I would say is that I wanted to be, like you were talking about, top of mind. And I didn't care that that person was actually going to consume my product. I wanted them to know about what was going on. And I would have husbands that would come into the salon that they would never come and get their hair done, but they would be like, oh yeah, I saw you on the UFC. And so it was that kind of connection point. How can a law firm create non-traditional marketing? Because the marketing that we generally think of is just a billboard that says interact, get a check, and then a number. But you take us into the mind of the marketing genius that you are on how you're able to keep top of mind in Iowa there.
Well, you know that the challenge in marketing is to find people who know, like, and trust you, because they're the ones who are going to hire you. And so the key for us is to make sure that people know, like, and trust us. And we do that in a number of ways, whether it is, coaching middle school, high school mock trial teams for 28 years, as I've done, whether it is, I'm going to be going in a couple of weeks and teaching law merit badge at a Boy Scout merit badge university, whether it is things like that, just to be out there, because that's a way to connect with people in a way that's authentic to me, right? But let me give you an example of top of mind advertising that we're really proud of. One of the things that we try to encourage and inspire in our firm is the idea of gratitude. And so a couple of years ago, we said, well, how could we do that, on a bigger scale? We've got 16 lawyers, we have 40 some staff members. We said, why don't we celebrate people for writing handwritten thank you notes? So at any point during your workday, if you're interacting with somebody outside the firm and they do something that is worth saying thank you for, here everybody are firm thank you cards, nice embossed thank you cards, write a handwritten thank you note. And then what we do is every month, anybody who sent out a handwritten thank you note, we have a big drawing and they get a gift card. And then we keep track. And if you sent out any employee, it could be a lawyer, it could be a paralegal, it could be a file clerk. If they send out a handwritten thank you card out into the public, once every month for 12 months, they're entitled to a special bonus at the end of the year. And the idea is that we are just sending out all of these thank you notes, and you're getting thank you notes for, hey, thank you for, you were so nice when you delivered our sandwich, my sandwich today to my office, so I could stay and work. Or, hey, it was really hard to, it's usually really hard to schedule to get an appointment with the doctor, for one of our lawyers to call, and you made it nice and easy. And so I've gone into offices, professional offices, and I've seen the thank you notes that my staff has written on somebody's bulletin board pinned up on their wall, because you just don't get those very often.
Wow. So I think the holy grail, I don't know if it is in your industry, I'm sure that it is too. The support staff, when I say the support staff, I'm grouping people into a non-board certified lawyer, okay, or attorney. Generally, the support staff, when I'm grouping that, so I want you all to know that I respect you, Veronica and Diana, works with my brother. I mean, I know the amount of work that you guys do. How do you foster, keep, and compensate someone in that role to make sure that they don't feel less than as you grow? Because that's a pain point a lot of times, because they're the most important, but a lot of times, I mean, there's a lot of times a difference or a hierarchy at times. How are you able to manage that?
Well, it's always a challenge, but first of all, you want to pay people well. You want to give them good benefits. You want to make sure that they feel like working for you is a career, not just a job. But ultimately, it comes down to respect. And one way that we try to portray that is, listen, we love our clients and we want to do right by our clients. But if our clients mistreat, snap at one of our staff members, then all the staff member has to do is let the lawyer know, and we're going to part ways. Because as important as our clients are, our staff is more important. And so hopefully they feel like they are respected and appreciated, because we let them know that, hey, we're more, you're more important than any one client to us. And that's worked out pretty well. My secretary is going to be celebrating her 25th anniversary with the firm. We're sending her to Hawaii, with her husband to celebrate, and so hopefully, that's the people feel respected and appreciated, and that's why they stay.
I might get you in some hot water with this question, but you said that nothing was off limits. Now, obviously, different industries, but again, we owned salons, years ago, and we owned them all over the country. But we ran into a challenge because there's a formula for support staff, or let's call it the front desk staff, and hourly workers, right? So there was a formula that if you went over that formula, you actually lost money. And in most businesses, we understand this. We came up with a little creative way of being able to compensate. Say, front desk, we only had a certain amount in the budget to be able to do it. Otherwise, it didn't make any sense, and we communicated that to the person. We then added in a gratuity to the front desk, but it didn't come from the clients, it came from the staff. And so with the staff, what happened is people said, well, won't that create favoritism? And I said, absolutely. Because if the front desk staff gets gratuity from Johnny, when they answer the phone, then Johnny is probably going to get a little preferential treatment. I'm okay with that because Johnny was willing to get the Starbucks card or do the gratuity or whatever it was. So we were able to kind of almost fix that, but that was aggressive. No one else did that in our industry. Is there, how do you work those things out? And is there a formula for law firms that want to continue to grow? Is there percentage wise, or is there a formula that a person can use as a standard to be able to compensate?
Well, I mean, there's all kinds of I guess accounting formulas out there in terms of what percentage of your revenue should be, staff versus whatever. But here's something that we do that it doesn't answer a big structural problem, but I think addresses in some ways the situation you've raised. The reality of our business is, as sophisticated as we like to think we are, uh, people will often decide to call or not based upon the number of Google reviews you have, and so uh, we have tried to incentivize our staff. Obviously, you can't pay a client, you can't to leave a Google review, but you can sure as heck bonus staff members whose for whose clients leave Google reviews. And that's really, one of the things that I hear from some lawyers is they're like, oh, I feel so uncomfortable asking for a Google review. And I said, here, I'll give you the secret. I'll talk to my client and I'll say, did you feel like we respected you? Did you feel like we worked hard for you? Yes, yes. And of course, they know their paralegal because their paralegal was the one who they probably talked to on the phone as much as anybody. I said, I'm going to let you in on something. At the end of the year, we look to see how many 5-star reviews everybody's clients left. And the nicest thing that you could do for your paralegal is to leave a 5-star review, because that's going to be accounted for in her bonus at the end of the year. And it's not me asking for me or the firm. It's say, hey, you want to do a favor for the person who did all kinds of work for you. Here's how you do it. And my promise to you as the owner is we're going to make sure that they're financially recognized for that.
When there's attorneys in your organization, which obviously if they're working in Iowa, everyone in Iowa knows who Tim Semelroth is, which causes an influx of business just for the fact that you are who you are. How do you then foster the not the aggression is the wrong word, but to keep somebody who's in that, say I'm an attorney in it, and I've got a constant flow of clients coming through. Sometimes I can kind of rest on my laurels and be like, oh, cool, I work with Tim, therefore I don't have to push as much. How do you create and foster the type of go-getter attitude when sometimes if you did work with you, you don't really have to have it?
So I have not figured out the secret to that problem yet. What I'll tell you is there are some people who are naturally business getters, and there are people who are not. And, I like to joke with my partners. I mean, the reason why we make the big bucks is because our job is to find a way to support both types of people and run a profitable firm. And so, if it's not in their nature to go out and get business, then we need to put them in a position to be successful, to be valuable to the firm despite that. But if you find that person who likes to go out there and make connections and build relationships and bring in cases, then those people have to be appreciated. They have to be supported. So it's sort of like, hey, you can't send, I think this is a John Morgan say, you can't send a turkey to Eagle School. But if you find yourself with an eagle on your hands, you got to make sure that you're giving them a chance to fly. And so where I am right now is that I see one of my most important jobs is to be a cheerleader for all the great, talented lawyers that we have in our firm. And so I like nothing better than to go to a meeting, to go to a conference with a lawyer at my firm where I can brag about them, talk about how smart and talented they are, because that's going to be it. A cult of personality is gonna only gets you so far. But when you are creating a team of heroes and celebrating all of them, then you can do something really special.
My brother and I have talked about it, and we've referred to it. I told him one time that there was two types of people in the world: zoo animals and wild animals. Wild animals are willing to go out, eat, hunt until they're willing to die based off of going after the risk of eating for that day. Then there's zoo animals who eat what they were fed. They get up on a certain time. Everything's comfortable, and if you put them in the wild, then they're going to die. If you put the wild animal inside the cage, it's probably going to die. What is the percentage for you, the ultimate percentage of wild animals and zoo animals that you want to have in the firm that creates the magic?
Well, I'll take as many wild animals as are willing to take jobs. But the reality is that I think probably 60-70% of your lawyers are probably going to be, zoo animals. That you would be surprised. I mean, lawyers are not they're not the risk takers that maybe some people think they are. They tend to be pretty risk adverse.
Okay.
And we could get into the psychology of why they ended up going to law school and why they ended up doing whatever. But the reality is that they are. And so, but I think the secret to success is, number one, putting together a firm where the zoo animals can be productive and valuable and appreciated. And then two, make sure you also have a setup so that when you get one of those wild animals, that you're giving them room to run.
How do you get them not to clash? Because what I found in times when I did have a zoo animal and I fed them because they needed to be fed, and then the wild animal, I gave them as much free range to go out and hunt as possible. Sometimes I would have the zoo animal saying, well, why did they get that? And then I was like, well, you want me to put you in the field by yourself? And that sometimes I had challenges in communication. How do you effectively communicate to make sure that they don't turn on each other?
I try very hard not to have anybody in the firm competing with each other. I want them to feel like they're all part of the same team. I want them to celebrate each other's successes. Sure, occasionally that's going to happen. All I know what to do is just say, listen, ultimately, my partners and I, we're the captains of the ship, and we're going to make these decisions, and we're going to treat everybody fairly, which doesn't necessarily mean that we're treating everybody equally. And hopefully you believe enough in our vision that you want to be part of the team.
Let's talk about the vision too, Tim, because when you go from, when you start off in any profession, you start off wanting to master your craft. Then you master your craft. And once you do, not everyone makes the successful transition that you have into helping others to master their craft. But that's a whole different role. How did you transition, and what advice would you give to someone they were mastering their craft and they wanted to, let's call it, for all intents and purposes, the next level, because that next level is then helping people to master their craft, because then you get to be a Tim, where a Tim is now cheering on all the people as opposed to having to be doing the actual thing all the time. Help us with that transition. Is it just a smooth sailing? Is it, sunshine and rainbows all the time in that transition? And how can a person start to, work that transition, get prepared for it?
Right. Well, so for me, it was fairly natural because my natural state is being a teacher. As I said, my mom was a teacher. My wife was a teacher. I have a sister that's a teacher. And so once I master something, it's like, I want to share it, and that's why I coach. That's why. And I love, that's speaking at conferences is just an extension of that. But I think ultimately it comes down to, I guess, maturity. I mean, when you're younger and you're mastering things, you want everybody to know that you're great and you need that. And trial lawyers are notorious for needing attention and appreciation. I think hopefully you get mature enough at some point that you realize that hey, just because somebody else is shining doesn't mean that my star is dimming. And it's so I think it's a mindset thing. When you start to get satisfaction out of watching the people that work for you achieve, I think that's when you're well on your way. But part of that is being comfortable enough. Like, hey, I don't need to be the star. I don't need to. I don't need to sign up every client. I don't need to take every deposition. I don't have to give every closing argument. And so I think that's the key, is realizing that the next level of success comes from being a teacher and being a coach, not just being a performer.
How have you been able to help foster, when you were talking about signing up clients? This is a big one in you guys' profession. And, sometimes people feel like, it's not really my bag to sign them up. I'll make sure and do all the stuff, but it's not. How can you foster that type of behavior if you were to list it out in a couple of little things from a kid? You're dealing with middle school and high school, so you're getting them early and you're setting them up. How do you lay that foundation to not only be the practitioner, but also we got to sign some people up? What are some of the things that they could put in play that would help that?
Well, you want them to feel comfortable with it. There are some people who are born salespeople, but most people need to be taught. And so I think the key is that if you have good salespeople, is letting your new employees shadow those people, see what they do, see how they respond, and because you can develop better sales skills. But ultimately, people are going to be who they're going to be. And so just like we talked about with wild animals and zoo animals, some people are sales people and some people aren't. And you got to make sure that the people who in your organization who are salespeople are getting the best opportunities. That's what I talk about by treating people fairly rather than equally. The reality is that if you're a closer, if I can put you in a room and you're going to come out with the signed contract, then the biggest and the best cases are going to be assigned to you. And people just have to recognize that that's an important metric.
So if you were to be able to sit down with young Tim, who just got into this stuff, you tried out a bunch of different areas, and then you kind of found your place, in personal injury, and then even niche down into the truck side of it. But you got to sit down with that young Tim and you and let him know about some of the things that were going to come along in not the trial side of it, not in trying cases, but in building a business. What would 3 or 4 of those things be that would have been so beneficial for you to hear at that early stage?
Sure. You say 3 or 4. The first big one that comes to mind is that you need to give energy to maintaining relationships. So I was really good at joining something, and when I was a part of it, being a contributor and developing great relationships. But terms end. Your time in certain organizations end. And what I wish that I had known from the beginning is that the best thing that I could do for my career would be to set aside some time, set aside some energy to maintain those relationships, even after the reason why you're together is gone. I wish that I could go back to law school and put everybody I went to law school with on my Christmas card list. And, it's like I wish that that I was still I still had a way to be connected to the guys on my fantasy football league when I was 20 years old. Relationships take energy. And when you're busy and you're growing a practice and you're raising a family, sometimes you don't give enough of that to to relationships, and they kind of wither. And the thing about being a lawyer, in particular a personal injury lawyer, who your best cases come from referrals, you should start early and you should start often maintaining those relationships, even after the reason why you came together is done. And if you do that, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, you're going to be more successful than you could ever imagine.
Where does your calm and peaceful demeanor come from, Tim?
uh, I think my mom is we call her a living saint. She raised 5 kids, and we 3 of them were boys, and we all like to joke that we each made it to the principal's office in our own special way. And she just had she's still with us, thankfully, but she has just a calm, peaceful way about her. And life gets busy, but if I am not too big to call up my mom and talk through a situation with her, because she's just I still care so much about her judgment and her wisdom. And then I would say that my wife is the same way. I think of a lot of big decisions that I've had to make professionally. And even though my wife has nothing to do with, she never went to law school, if I talk through a scenario with her, more often than not, she's going to, point me in the right direction. So I'm just lucky to have a support system in place of people who are willing to listen to me. And because of that, I have a certain sense of peace.
Tim, how important is the onboarding process, whether it be in your business or in the relationships that you form?
Oh, it's huge. I thought what you were going to ask me about, the one thing I prepared for is, when we were sitting in that pool room at NiftyCon, I told you that I get my best ideas from other industries. And so one of the books that I love is a book called The Power of Moments by the Heath brothers. And they talk about an onboarding process that John Deere uses. And I'm embarrassed that, I live in Iowa. John Deere, is an institution in Iowa, and I didn't know about it until I read this book. But they talk about, the first day of a job is so important, and it sets the tone for the whole relationship. And so they talk about at John Deere, it's like somebody's, reaching out to you ahead of time, telling you where you're going to park, meeting you in the lobby, taking you to your desk, and there at your desk is a replica of the first plow that John Deere ever sold, and it's got a little story of where the company began. And I thought that was just the coolest thing. And so it doesn't matter if you're getting hired as a lawyer, it doesn't matter if you're getting hired as a summer intern at our firm. A couple of things are going to happen. You're going to get a phone call ahead of time telling you where to park. You're going to have somebody meeting you at the door. You're going to have a group of people who are set up to take you out to lunch. But then on our firm's 30th anniversary, we filmed interviews with our 2 founding partners, and through pictures and video, they tell the story of the firm, where it came from, what the idea was behind it, and we have everybody watch that video so that they understand, where this firm started and what the vision was then and where we're going.
Wow. I mean, this is If you guys didn't understand why I wanted Tim, I was going to force Tim to be my friend for the rest of your life, of his life. You understand now. I started the podcast, Tim, because of my 2 kids, right? You heard about them at NiftyCon when I was talking about the Iron Man pancakes and stuff like that. But I didn't want my kids to worship idols. I didn't want my kids to look at like a Tim Semelroth and be like, oh man, that's someone that I worship. He's a god, which you are in your own right in what you do. I wanted them to be inspired by iconic people who are just people that breathe, air just like them. And that if Uncle Tim could do it, it was possible for them to do it also. So what advice would you have for Maddox and McKenna? And if you could use both their names and call yourself Uncle Tim, it would be awesome.
Hey, Maddox and McKenna, this is Uncle Tim. And the one thing that I want to share with you today is that you will regret the missed chances much more than the failed attempts, which means for Maddox, you're a sports guy, take the bat off your shoulder, take the swings, man. McKenna, you're into fashion, make the pitch, do the bold thing. That's the lesson that I try to pass on to my kids as they graduate from high school and go on to college, is that it's not the failed attempt that haunts you. It's never getting up off the bench and taking your shot. And that's what I hope for you, is that you guys have a lifetime of taking shots.
Well, Tim, it's amazing. I know I have a guy in Iowa, and now everybody out there that's listening, you all have a guy in Iowa. You have a truck accident, you have any type of personal injury, you have a guy in Iowa. And the cool thing for me is it's not from a pitch of like, oh, wow, this is the commercial for Tim. It's just, I know who you are, man. Like, I got to spend time with you. And it's incredible. The more and more time that I got to spend, I asked you for a phone call the other day, and we got on the phone, and I had a specific question for you. We got a chance to be able to chat, and you gave me more. Every time that I'm with you, you give me more than what I asked for. And I want to tell you how much I appreciate you, my man.
Well, thank you. It's been great to get to know you, and there's nothing more inspiring than being in the crowd when you're giving one of your keynote speeches. And so my hope is that as we go forward, I'm going to be in a lot of those crowds.
Well, we're going to share stages together, man. I mean, it's an absolute honor and pleasure. And I want to thank everyone out there for listening. If you guys haven't, pick up the book, The Vibe. It's in the link is in the bio. You guys got it. Tim's got it at home too. But the main thing is, if you have a person in Iowa, you're close to Iowa, you have any challenges in Iowa, now you all have a guy in Tim Semelroth. And I pronounced it right the first time when I looked at it. It was daunting at first, Tim, but when I looked at it, I was like, how can I get this? Because I know people destroy the name. But I want to tell you how much I appreciate you, how incredible you are. And I would like to ask you in front of everybody if you would be on the show again, because I think that you add so much value, and there's so many different avenues and rabbit holes that we can go down in the future.
I would love it. This has been great.
Well, it's awesome. Stick around for a second, Tim. We're going to run a commercial, but I want to thank you so much, Tim, for being on the show, and you're officially off the hot seat. Peace, love, and soul.
On my mind, I got to shine, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised.